Now, this next segment is interesting, right? Because I started kind of researching this idea around, trying to find out, like, okay, um, what's happening with really just this idea of the super rich people who are just buying private islands and bunkers. And I found an article, right? But I won't be linking that article because, you can do your own research in terms of figuring that out, in terms of trying to really dig into this particular concept around rich people building bunkers. But the reason why I'm not linking this article is because it seems like propaganda for the billionaires, honestly, and the ultra rich, because it's just like the article talks about how like the billionaires and all the all the billionaires, um, they don't, they're not simply buying bunkers. Some of them are, building houses with bunkers because they can afford them, and that right there was just like it was just very like, well, what are we talking about? Because even at some point, like this the same article talks about how they were buying islands, with not necessarily, and they made sure to say not necessarily bunkers, just islands that were just away from the general populace, where they were less likely to be subject to protest or wars. And I was like, wow, that's crazy, because we're talking about basically the same concept here. Like, you guys are just basically moving away from people that can hold you accountable. What a surprise. It was pretty interesting in itself. And um, and being away from the consequences that could arise from being involved in a war is also by itself a tremendous problem in terms of the people who are, I mean, when you think about the oil conglomerates who can, who are going to benefit from any type of regime change that comes from the Middle East, you probably want them in America if things go wrong. Like, you don't really want them on a private island somewhere if things go wrong. And but anyway, this idea led me to really talk about or really research more about the concept of, particularly this. I came into contact with this article, right, and this article was particularly about the revolving door between the Pentagon and private industry, because this idea is interesting, right? Because our Department of Defense, it's interesting that we call them the Department of Defense, because they're doing absolutely nothing to make us a more resilient society, right? They're focused on really padding the pockets of defense contractors, right? And the author of this particular article is Ryan Summers, right? And he writes about how really and this is POGO, POGO. What is that called? Government Oversight something. Uh, and I'm pretty sure this is a reputable source. You can check it out and decide for yourself. But this idea of like POGO, or this article, it talks about this door, this ever revolving door, and just I think a quote here is really telling from the article. Is a startling figure highlighted by the Cost of Wars project is the consolidation of contracts going to the country's top defense contractors, where 1/4 to 1/3 of all Pentagon contracts in the recent years have gone to 5 major weapons contractors: Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. Lockheed Martin is now infamous. Lockheed Martin's infamous F-35 fighter jets, which are known for their major design flaws, are estimated to cost the taxpayers a staggering 1.727 trillion over the program's lifespan. And this article, it goes over like a lot of the dangers of our current system, but we're paying to make, we're paying the same defense contractors with our overinflated military budget, where the Pentagon fails every single audit, right? And these guys, they don't have some kind of they don't have a competitive environment where they're pressured to be more effective or efficient with the money, right? This is costing us a lot, and this idea of in just basically inflating the pockets of these guys, it's indicative of a very huge problem, I think, by itself. I think a lot of us need to understand, in the not Pentagon, the Pandora Papers we talked about early in a earlier segment. These guys were, faced with tremendous amounts of inflation when essentially their currency was the political or the politicians robbed the country in a lot of these cases. And somebody could spend their entire life saving up money, and now that money is just basically, it's just basically paper now, because of what how much politicians got away with. And now I think that's gonna become an ever increasing issue here. But outside of just that, I think we need to understand something. Before this concept of really armies, right? Armies that belong to nations, they, or nations, or those spaces in between the lines we draw on the map, basically, right? But the idea is, this idea of a military, it was actually more close. It was actually before this concept of the nations. We had really more private militaries, right? Private militaries that belonged to individuals and groups of people that were simply paying them. They weren't loyal to a nation. They were loyal to the amount of money that they got from certain people. And we've got this problem that's becoming a lot bigger now, and I think it's very much understated in terms of what's happening, because the politicians are all paid. What do you want? But the idea here is that a lot of people, even when we withdrew from the Middle East, most of the people on the ground were actually contractors, or a significant amount, don't quote me on that, but a significant amount of them were contractors. And in Africa, basically, it is all these countries. You're seeing just private military go insane in a lot of these countries. In South Africa, you got executive outcomes, but basically it's even in the continent of South America, we got tremendous amounts of military running around protecting the interest of rich people, right? Rich people who have who want the bananas that we get. Those guys are ruthless. They're absolutely ruthless in terms of how they do business with these countries, and it is insane that they're able to do this and that they are actively doing this. But this idea of private military, it's growing in popularity. It's not diminishing in popularity. It's growing, right? And companies right now, they're coming to an understanding that, hey, we can kind of do regime change in this place, and then we have access to the mines and the people who work the mines for very, very small amounts. We got it, And if they talk, if they if they if they dare talk out their side of their mouths, then we'll handle them. Like, we got it's a paradise. And you guys have to understand that we haven't seen this concept of what our government is abroad. We don't know how life is abroad. We don't know that. When it comes down to these people, our idea, our bubble that we live in, if it ever pops, that is not something that you can simply just put back in the genie's bottle. You can't do that. That's why it's very, very much important for us to pay attention to what's happening, especially when it comes down to rich people and this increasing wealth gap. These guys, right now, like, you don't want these guys, these armies coming up who are only loyal to money, because the people who can pay for them and can afford them are the people who have been stealing our tax dollars for a very long time. You know what I'm saying? Like, these aren't, you're not going to, if it ever comes to America, you would wonder. I have like, I wrote a poem one time. It was just like, basically like, there was a person who asked, like, hey, why do all the soldiers have foreign accents? Right? And you don't know that until you really understand the concept of, oh, you can afford an entire army from another country that was, essentially trained by people from our military who went into the private industry to teach other people, how to build drones or whatever. And now they're marching on our streets to tell us to get inside of our homes and make sure that we follow suit with. It can get I can't paint a bad enough picture for you if this bubble pops, because we inside the country we looked very, very much clean, but it is night and day. And I want you guys to understand that concept of Doge. These guys just went in and they got all this data, and then they go to the Pentagon and they sit down with everybody in the Pentagon and they want to talk to them, like, formally. Interesting. Elon comes out himself to talk to these guys. It's crazy. He didn't. There was no meeting that I remember with anybody else. But all of a sudden, you get like an increased military budget, which is, wow, it came out of nowhere. You guys need to understand something. The chances that the chances that this is more so a very much agreed upon liquidation is a lot higher than you guys understand now. And that the world is really, or not that you guys understand, but that's being broadcast right now. We need to really come to that understanding and that conclusion that this was an agreement for this guy to come in and do what he's doing. This was an agreement across the table. This was not something that we were just overwhelmed by this overwhelming force, like China's coming in to take over the to take over the government or something. In terms of the lesson here, right? So we have the zodiac sign of Capricorn, right? And Capricorn would represent themes around defense, right? And Mars is the planet that would represent, of course, this spectrum of things, as does Capricorn. And the idea is that it also, in this, you should understand that Mars represents war and conflict. And Mars is particularly exalted or strongest in Capricorn, right? So it kind of makes sense that a lot of the military around, it's named, the Department of Defense, right? Like, you really don't want to name an industry the Department of Attack. That would be, that would be wild. But the idea here is that we can use this energy, right? Because Mars is exalted, so that means it's strongest, and it's its strongest in Capricorn, and we can use this idea, this impulse, right? And we have this investment in the Department of Defense. I think that the turnout is horrible, but we have good we have I think we have a solid impulse to really invest and understand that, because this is how societies form, right? From armies, right? You get the army, and the army protects this line drawn or whatever. I think that impulse may be correct in terms of how things are today, but it also, in terms of actually what we're doing, what we're seeing, another way to use this energy, I think, would be, for example, Capricorn also in that spectrum would represent resiliency. And I would recommend that we reform this Department of Defense into being responsible for making a more resilient society. So we can't simply just let things go the way they are now, though. That's the ultimate understanding.